I think I'm going to get $350,000 out of this deal, but if I wait 2 more years, I can get $500,000 out of this deal. That might mean me being greedy, settling for a 350. You ruin the deal by not settling for a really good payout because you don't want to get that attitude. What are you willing to accept as an acceptable win?
Welcome to The Boost, a podcast for home service contractors. We explore leaders and innovators in home services, their personal journeys, thoughts, and experiences with growth, marketing, and succession. We cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and its ultimate impact. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Boost. I'm Zach Wilson, Chief Marketing Officer of Lokal. We're here today in lovely Savannah, live podcasting from CAAG, and I'm here with Tom Lucas, owner and general manager of Dayco Systems. So welcome, Tom. So Tom and I met last fall at ACA in Indianapolis and started talking about Tom's journey, and I wanted to have Tom here today. How'd you get started in HVAC?
That's a long story. So I'm one of the guys that just came in at the very bottom. I actually got out of the military in 91, which was right during the Gulf War.
Okay.
So that's a whole different story. We can do that podcast later.
Coming soon.
Yeah.
Gulf War podcast.
Yeah. End of 91, I moved to Georgia from California, which is where I'm from. And because my Army buddy was working in HVAC in Georgia and said it was a booming industry in Atlanta at the time. There was a lot of new construction going on. So I came to Atlanta and with zero knowledge and pickup truck with all my belongings in the back. And
Classic story.
Yeah. And
driving cross country, pickup truck, windows down.
Yeah. Exactly. That's it. And I was moving to Georgia to become a collar contractor.
So you had a job, or you didn't have a job?
I mean,
you moved here for the job?
Not necessarily a job because it was subcontracting.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So as a subcontractor, you have to go find the work.
But you got linked up with someone.
With someone who was already doing it, but he was also kind of novice in it. He just had some HVAC experience, but so we kind of figured it out as we went, how to go to different companies and solicit ourselves to get work. It took a couple of years to get our feet under us, to start making any money, but boy, I'll tell you what, through the 90s, there was a lot of money made in the HVAC field. So that's where I started. My first 15 years was in doing the new house installations of the HVAC systems. 15 years. At the end of that, I was running 10 guys, 2 crews, doing a couple of houses a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so it was really good. But then in the late 90s, all that started to go away. The construction industry was ramping down, and with my peers, had to find jobs in companies where we were actually employees. Well, I did install with a large company, Ray.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did for a long time. And got into service, and then I was a supervisor, and then a local company called, a rather large pest control company called Northwest Exterminating, started an HVAC division. And so I jumped on that, and they needed all positions, so I came in there as an install manager. That was a short-lived project. It didn't work out. So I was at a conference, a training conference, and I met my current partner, whose name is Dean Yarrington, who owns Dayco Systems. And we met at a training conference because, funny enough, both of our wives are from Brazil. Fluent Portuguese because I have a history before I met my wife in Brazil, and so me and my wife were in the buffet line for food, speaking Portuguese, or kind of a mix of Portuguese and English like we do. And someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you speaking Portuguese?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. You have to come sit with us." And that's how me and Dean met.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So my wife takes full credit for that.
Probably can't say that about many shops, that there's a team of owners that speak Portuguese.
No, that's unusual, isn't it?
I mean, Spanish maybe, but you don't find a lot of Brazil.
It's not a very.
Not very. Although that George Brazil guy, is he actually?
I don't think so.
He's not. That's just a moniker.
Yeah.
Oh, that's his name. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
So yeah, it's an interesting story because if it weren't for that, I would not have come across this opportunity. And at first, there was no ownership discussion. It was just he needed a general manager. Exactly what I was looking for. I wanted to come in we did talk right off the bat about, hey, are you interested in maybe a future possibility of buying in to ownership? And I said, sure.
This
I'm
was
willing to
like
talk
how
about it.
20 years ago, and like
No, this was 8 years ago.
oh, 8 years ago
So
was when this started.
2016.
Oh, okay, was when that
2016
started.
is when I met Dean.
Oh, okay. I thought we were still early 2000s.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
no.
but
Yeah, I
gotcha.
skipped forward, didn't I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
okay.
skipped a bunch of stuff we don't
Two
need to talk
two
about.
decades.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was 2 decades of working with. I worked for 10 years with Cool Ray.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So that was quite a long. And actually, twice I moved to Florida during that time for a few years. Moved back. I started a company in Florida. It was with ServiceMaster.
Oh, okay.
Disaster restoration. But I was their license holder for a few years there. So
Yeah.
in that Cool Ray span, I left Cool Ray, went to Florida for a few, started a business, didn't work out. It was a partnership that didn't work out, and then I moved back to Georgia, went back to Cool Ray, got into the supervision side of things, and then made the jump to Northwest. I was
Gotcha.
at Northwest for less than a year. I think
Okay.
about a year.
Okay.
And then now we're in 2016, me and Dean.
Meeting
Yeah.
Dean in the food line speaking Portuguese.
So
Check.
Now understand, Dayco Systems at the time was about a $2.5 million company.
Okay.
So I was a general manager running a van too.
Right.
I was in the field.
Uh-huh.
So helping out wherever, we didn't have a lot of people, so
Yeah, I mean,
You
you're
wore a lot
just
of hats.
you're wearing
Yeah.
I mean, the org structure at 1, 2, 5, 10, you get more and more specialized every
Exactly. Have to.
few. Yeah.
So then we went from 2.5 million to like 5 million, 7 million. We got into the most of that growth was we got into the apartment world and started doing large apartment
Oh, okay.
renovations. In 2022, our biggest year was 14.5 million. So from 2016 to 2022, that's 20 to 30% growth.
Yeah. Year over year. Yeah,
It was
that's awesome.
crazy. 5 years ago, so we'll say 2018, 2019. That's when we really started the ownership thing. And how that was structured was, I didn't have the only asset I have is my house, which I was pretty straightforward that I did not want to put my assets up. We got creative, and the structuring is basically we'll do it in 5% increments. I'll loan you 5% so that you can make money on that 5% to pay the loan. So in other words, your 5% of profit is going to be applied directly back to me. I'll loan you the 5% until it's paid off. So it takes 3 or 4 years, depending on what the profit is at the time. So we worked out a deal where you basically get an owner financed 5%, and then your percentage of the profits goes back to the owner to pay for the 5%.
Right.
So
Right.
we did that to get to about 10% is about where we are now. So in those 5 years, we got up to about 5% paid off.
Okay.
I mean 10%.
10%. Right.
Just about. And now we're at a stage now where we're talking about how can we, because he's 72 years old, the company is in a transition period with everything going on that we all know about in the industry, where it's the industry is going through a change right now with COVID and all the stuff we've been through in the last few years, and now with high interest rates and all of that going on. A lot of our apartment work has shifted away. We're restructuring to focus on residential. So it's almost like we're creating Dayco 2.0. So we're saying, okay, since we're in this transitional period, let's see if we can figure out how to finish up the transfer of ownership. At the
Right.
same time.
Right.
Does it just make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not getting any younger.
Right.
For
and,
one, just to talk about that really quickly too. I mean, you don't like to have these conversations, but the hit by the bus conversation is more important now than ever, right? At 72 as a male, right? Just calling it out, and I'm sure you've thought about this, but like to everybody listening is that like anything can happen any day, right? And what happened, what happens if like, okay, well, we had this back of the envelope or back of the napkin conversations, it gets handed down through his will or whatever, and his wife, and it's like, I just want out now. Like, I don't want to deal with any of this, and so much can happen at any point in time. Go ahead to move things forward.
But that's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
On the one hand, Dean worked really hard and created a successful company. So if you look at it from his point of view, it's like half of me wants to keep going and right? It's my
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah.
It's my baby. It's hard to let go. I
Yeah.
have a lot of ideas and
Right.
I want to help.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I can help.
Right.
I have a lot of experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And by the way, that's also part of what's being negotiated is, hey, how can you continue to participate without being in operations and
Right.
in the day-to-day, which there's a lot. Like the one thing that we're discussing is acquisitions, which he seems to have a talent for. He's really good at going out and connecting with other owners and feeling out what their needs are and bringing them in. We've done 4 or 5 acquisitions in our 5 or 6 years.
Oh, wow. Oh, and just since you've been on?
Yeah, just absorbing smaller operations.
Just exploring that a little bit. What has been augmented in those acquisitions? Like, what are the specific synergies that you guys have?
Customer list, right?
Oh, okay.
We're not really purchasing assets like.
I mean, is there
smaller
like?
Operation that has a couple of old vans?
Yeah.
A smattering of tools probably in a garage or in
Yeah.
a storage bin, and
But-
they say we're not interested in that.
Yeah.
Let's see your customer list, and we'll absorb the customer list, and we'll pay you a chunk of money up front plus a percentage over the next 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. No, I
Whatever
mean,
your
yeah,
customer
yeah,
list
yeah.
is.
I think in terms of a lot of these, and we've had a lot of conversations about this too, is that those customer lists are, depending on the sophistication of the company, the less sophisticated, generally speaking, the lower value because they don't have the retention mechanisms, the customers aren't sticky. So it's like someone comes and I've got a customer list of 5,000. It's like, okay, great, but like then turns out only 10% of that customer list as actually sticky and maybe on a maintenance plan or whatever. You're like, great, now I have to like re-nurture. I mean, yeah, I have the names and addresses of all these people, but I have to re-nurture 4,500 people in one area or whatever. It's like it's pretty low value, right?
And that's where you have to be careful up front when you're evaluating and doing your due diligence. You have to say, okay, how similar are our business practices? Because that's going to be a big factor in, like, are we using the same brand, right? Do we have the same kind of customer mentality? How about pricing? If our pricing is double what your pricing is, that's going to be tough transition for your customers.
Right.
So all of that you take into account, and then because we've been fairly good at that, we've had some good ones and some worse ones, right? Deals, but I would say our retention is about 50% on average.
For new acquisitions,
For the customer base, right? We get a list of
5,000 or 1,000,
It's,
yeah.
on the smaller ones, it's not that big.
Okay.
Get a list of 1,000. You're going to have 500 that stay active, and then smatter the rest of it. Maybe a hit or miss here and there, but not much activity.
And the value there, I think, from your end too, is as each one that you've done, you said you've done 4 or 5. Yeah, going into each one, your net is 50%, so you can actually price that in better as you go into these smaller acquisitions. And is there, and if you don't want to disclose it or not, or if you don't know it, is there a basic raw number of where what a customer, lifetime value of a customer is for these let's go back to 1,000, right? Like, so we know we're only going to get 500 of them. Each customer is valued at, I'm just making something up, $50. Not the case, but $100. So each customer costs $100 to buy. So therefore, these 4 acquisitions we've made, each customer has cost us approximately $100. And then deal number 5, you can go in and, okay, we got another 1,000 customers. It's going to cost us, again, $100, about $100 a customer.
We don't actually have a formula for that, but obviously we know through industry data that the lifetime value of any customer is $50,000. So that's the lifetime value of the customer. So if you spend $100, $200, $300 on a customer, and you transition them correctly and strategically and diligently, right, with good customer service, and you're not out there screwing up all the time, and you're able to retain that customer, then you know that over maybe, let's say, a 10-year lifespan, on average, you can get up to $50,000.
Right. That data, especially going through the process, because it is market specific, right? The data in the middle Tulsa compared to Atlanta.
50,000 maybe a few years behind because prices have gone up.
Yeah, right. I actually don't even know what, I probably should, the lifetime value across the industry is of a customer. We work towards that with our customers to try and understand that from the digital side, the acquisition cost of marketing, then what that translates into in terms of lifetime value. Those are the metrics that we work to reel in and understand, and then of course create performance around, right? So in terms of an industry average, I'll have to look that up. I actually don't know that.
Yeah, me neither. I haven't actually seen it in a while. I know that information from past studies. But also now this year, what we're focused on now is focus on acquisitions, but we're interested in HVAC acquisitions, small ones, maybe around $1 million is where we want to see an acquisition, because that seems to be a sweet spot for the guys who are doing it and maybe want to get out of it. They haven't, they're making an income, but it's not exciting income maybe for them, and they're doing it all themselves.
Right.
So that's the kind of the sweet spot we're looking for, but we're mainly focused this year on something new for us, which would be the plumbing acquisition.
Oh, interesting.
Or the
Expanding services.
Yeah, so that diversification becomes more and more important in our industry. And right now, the interesting thing is with all of the electrification talk going on with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, so all the money that's coming out to be available for the consumers for electrification of their homes, meaning heat pumps and all of that. So there's a lot of free money out there for the electrical world. And of course, that includes HVAC, so we can go install the HVAC, but there's there's going to be a lot of upgrades that need to be done to the house to be able to handle all this new electrical.
So being positioned to service that stuff.
So we're also interested in the electrical acquisitions as well. So, but first, I think
for all those people listening, anyone in metropolitan Atlanta, you guys are north. Where are you? North side? Northwest. Okay. North. So how many miles? Because minutes don't mean anything in from central Atlanta. Is that
30 minutes?
Oh, it's 30 minutes.
30 minutes, more or less. Yeah, from
depending, as long as it's not Saturday afternoon.
40 minutes from the airport to Ackworth. Yeah.
Okay. And are all your acquisitions strategic in terms of geographic? They're all northwest then?
Moving past that limitation.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, because we basically have a 30-mile radius, imaginary line saying, this is our comfort zone.
That's big.
Now, that doesn't mean we won't go 40 miles, but...
Yeah, I mean, that's really big, especially in Atlanta terms. But it probably changes if you're northwest as you go towards the city. It probably 40 miles.
Squiggly line.
Yeah, right. Like 40 miles is a long way if you're crossing city lines.
Lawrenceville, that's airport. That's,
That's a
lot.
Yeah. I'm no longer in Chicago, but going 5 miles in Chicago on a Saturday or Friday afternoon was an hour and a half. You can't service anybody in that amount of time.
Yeah,
you get to do 2 trips a day.
You could say, okay, this time in the morning is bad and this time in the afternoon is bad. Now it's just
all the time. Yeah. Sidebar, we were driving back from Disney last year about this time. On Sunday, we left at like 3 in the morning too. And shame on us because we're from Chicago and we knew Saturday and Sunday in Chicago, more or less, you don't go and run errands. You just don't. Like you're going to be in awfulness, pure awfulness. And we in Atlanta, like 2:00 on like Sunday afternoon, and I mean it was 3 hours to get from the south end of Atlanta to out of the traffic. It was awful. It was oh my, it was just awful. It was awful. Note to anyone traveling, make sure you don't go through Atlanta. But anyway, so back to where you're at. You're at 10%. Do you have a plan for 2024 in terms of acquiring more ownership? Is that in place?
Yeah, it's in development.
Okay.
So it's currently under negotiation, so it's limited as to what I can tell you. So what I can say is that I am working, we both want to do a deal. He's interested in getting out.
Yeah.
I'm interested in helping him do that and acquiring the company. So it's always more complicated than you think it's going to be. It's not a matter of
for sure.
Just get the financing, and because there's, in my case, there may be partners involved or investors involved for me to be able to arrange all of the assets and financing that I need to put together. On the Dean side, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be wrapped up and closed up and cleaned up, to be able to close the books up and move it over. And it's always a lot more complicated, and you never find out what the details are until you actually hit that detail, right? So it's like, okay, we got past this hurdle, and then the next hurdle that was invisible to you.
What's an example of a recent hurdle for you and or for him that have been like, okay, we're ready to move on, and then here's our hurdle of today, or he wants something or you want something or whatever?
Let's just, Dean has certain specific, because now he's not going to he'll be able to fix it.
Sure.
So he's got it all designed the way he wants it, and we're trying to work to make sure that the deal fits his needs, right? And so in on that side of the equation, that's not always cut and dry, because it has to do with, I'm going to put some of the money here to make a certain percentage of interest, and that interest is going to depend on that as my income on that account. And so he's very, very smart and very specific on how he's going to set up his retirement. It just poses problems on the buyer side. Every financial plus or minus on one side affects the financial plus or minus on the other side.
Yeah, in a big way. Yeah.
It takes a while to get the balance right to where both sides are like, okay, here we are.
That's interesting, because I feel like you drag these things out. Oh, and then this, and it's like you're just creating more friction gets created in general. And it's not, I'm sure it's not malintended. It's just, it sounds like
Each side wants to maximize.
Yeah. You want it for the cheapest amount that you can get it for, and he wants it for the most, and you're just going back and forth, and it just complicates things immensely. And it sounds like he's honestly like not totally ready, right? Like, I mean, there's a little piece of that. So
him that just says, maybe I'll just stay.
Right. Then is like, okay, well, I'll give up a little more, and that also complicates things from everyone's perspective.
I will tell you, all of that being said, never imagined that I would even have this opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I've only told you like 1% of the instances that steered me to this point in my life. Right? So,
Yeah.
And there's one big one that I think it's important to say for people out there who are maybe wanting to get in, even to sit at the table to be negotiating something like this in their life. Don't limit yourself, because this was a lesson I learned way back. Someone told me this, or I wouldn't have done this. One of the things that guided me to this position was when I got my HVAC license. Because there's two types of licenses. There's a limited license, which means you can do any kind of work up to 25 tons of capacity, and then there's your unlimited license, which means you can do anything. First, I was applying for my limited license because it is the easier license to get, which is not really, you find out later that's not really true, because the difference is about 4 questions of the test. So
they pitch it as it's a lot harder.
Yeah. I was coached by certain people who said, no, don't limit yourself.
Go all in.
Get the right license. And if I had not done that, Dean would not have been interested in me as even the general manager.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
that allowed them to.
Because if I'm going to be the license holder for the company, I can't hold a limited license. I can't limit the company. So
that's interesting. There are a lot of companies that do just hold those limited licenses, but that's also part of their focus. They're like, we're just small residential or whatever.
Guys, and this is fine too, that say, I'm not interested in being a $10 million company. $1 million a year, $100,000 for me, whatever, and I'm gonna be the main guy doing all the work. I'm gonna do this for 5 years. That's fine if that's the goal, but I still would recommend, you never know what opportunity is gonna walk past you.
Yeah.
On any given
for 4 extra questions.
Yeah. Well, and like for me, I met Dean by chance, right? And kudos to my wife, right? Because if it weren't for my Brazilian wife, Dean would have never tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you speaking Portuguese?" So it was pure chance that I met the guy. And then if I hadn't had the right license, 3 months later, we wouldn't have shaken hands and said, okay, let's do this. And then that led later on to me where we are now, negotiating for a purchase.
Going back to that, and this was probably prior to things getting really hot in terms of the market and private equity or some sort of external private funding or acquisition. Is he just not like exploring though? I mean, he's not interested in those culturally? There's people that are, hold on forever. There's people that are ESOP, they want to sell it to their employees. There's people that want their grandchild, to be the owner in, 30 years, family succession. And then there's the other people that build as quickly and as big and as quickly as possible and be done, right? Like, I want to get as much as I can out of this in 5 years, hand it over to someone else, and right? So there's whatever that is, 5 or 6 different examples, and there's more, right? Why do you think he's opted for this one? You alluded to the license, right? There's relationship.
It would seem like it's a more difficult process to try to do this than.
I mean, it can be. ESOPs, a couple people I've talked to that have done them they can be a couple years in terms of this. Yours is now going on, 7 years. So that's obviously longer. But then there's other ownerships that haven't been private equity that I've talked to people that have been 2 weeks. The owner is just like, I am done. I cannot get out of this quick enough. And the person ready to take it on is doing that. So
In our experience, and we did explore a couple of private equity offers before getting to where we are. In both cases, private equity offers, which we didn't get all the way through due diligence on those.
oh, so you guys did go down this road. Yeah.
We did not get all the way through due diligence because we saw untruths. In other words, one of them was telling us, you're going to get 10x, we can get you $12 million for your company. And we're just, really? Wow, that's, it's like.
So these are talking to like brokers or yeah. Okay.
And we were getting like, blue sky, like, golden rainbow, all these painted pictures. And then we also have business mentors and coaches that are saying, that's not. What happens is they always start up here, and then once you get into due diligence, it starts getting chipped away at, and by the time you get into real world scenarios, you're down to about half of what you originally thought your company was worth.
Yeah.
Instead of it being the 10x, they're down to 2x. So
a real number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were coached to watch out for that stuff and saying, if you're seeing that the difficulty of, in other words, the difficulty level of the conversation is progressing away from you, benefits away from you, you can expect that all the way down to the last minute of the transaction. In other words, what will normally happen is that at midnight on the day that the next day you're supposed to sign the deal and say, okay, we're good with that number. At midnight, they're going to call you or email you and say, oh, we just found another $500,000 we have to take out of this. Kind of a used cars mentality.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So, and I'm not saying that's all of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
guys, right? But in general, that's what you're going to find is a progressive taking away from you that starts out with them being like, we're going to keep all your people. We're going to give you maximum X factor on the sale. You're going to stay on board. You're going to get equity in the company, all of this perfect stuff. And by the end, they've chopped you down to like, and their hope is that they've beat you up so bad by then you're just tired and you say, okay, let's just do this. I want out.
Yeah. That's unfortunate.
And we saw that happening in both companies. We were seeing way too big of a number in front, like almost like we were being insulted, like, please.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. And then, of course, we saw that progressive treatment of, we need to see this, we need to see that. Oh, what's this number about? Why can't your balance sheet? What's that one on the balance sheet? Why are you paying this employee that much? And everything is a negative. that starts chopping things up. And so his decision was, I'm not going to go through that. Why am I going to go get all the way up to get beat up all the way up to the finish line to not when the likelihood of me getting what I want out of this, rather than them getting what they want out of this, is very low. I'm not going to go through that exercise, so I would rather deal with you where if it's me and you talking, we know each other, we're both, all we have to do is let's make sure that we both agree on the value of the company, number one, and agree to a number and get it worked out. There's none of this trying to trick each other.
I guess that's the positive side of it, that you can just cut all that out of it. Of course, the downside of that, or the other side of that, is you're taking out probably a lot of pretty complex and sophisticated analyses out of the company that those companies are very adept at doing, right? But who that benefits is,
So me personally, I am not. My talent is probably people management. It's not finances. So although I've learned a lot in the last 5 years, I am nowhere near qualified to negotiate a deal of this size. So I depend on a lot of people.
I mean, I guess that's another good question and a good segue is, do you have, or do you each have representation or, an advisor that's separate from the two of you, right? Like you can't, or even an intermediary that's helping you guys, each party through this deal.
And that's a complicated question because we both tend to have the same people.
Yeah.
Because we've worked together for a long time.
Right.
So although we have business advisors that are impartially can advise both of us what to do on their part, knowing that we're not trying to hide things from each other, right? But they can tell Dean, look, from your perspective, you need to be looking for this from Tom. And Tom, from your perspective, and they can do this, and they'll tell me, look, anything I talk with the other party, I'm not going to tell you. Okay? If he wants to tell you, that's a different thing, but I'm not going to be the one to tell you. I'm good. I'm fine with that. You can advise him and advise me, and then me and Dean will work out how truthful we want to be with each other as to what's being done. So there's one lawyer, there's the company lawyer that I don't need a lawyer on my side yet. So the lawyer is really basically just being used to help him structure the retirement side. There's going to be two lawyers involved when the actual contract is drafted, so that the two lawyers can come together and say, okay, here's the buyer language, the seller language, let's make sure we get everything in here correct.
When was the last valuation? Number one, did you have an external evaluation done?
Yeah, but we have to take those with a grain of salt, like I said, because the external valuations that you get done are by brokers. And brokers, by nature, want to overvalue, so that by the time you get through the process, you're down to the number you get.
When was the last one done?
When?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's pretty new. Relative. Yeah, reliable.
So we know what our X factor should be that we should apply to our process to get good valuation. Based on a good ballpark valuation. It's between friends, colleagues, me and him. There's a lot of playroom in there. Like I'm willing to accept a number from him that a PE company would probably just say, no way. We're not doing that because the PEs have a different MO for the next, they have a plan, right? They're going to do with this company.
Yeah.
And it's more about liquidity. And then also, from both of our perspectives, we've been very culture focused for the last 5 years. Very, very culture focused. And what I mean by that is we went through the process of creating the core values, core purpose, mission statement, all of that. And all of that ended up to be very people. So, like for instance, our mission statement is to improve lives. It's pretty simple. So, and that
can mean a lot.
Yeah, it's everything. It's the team, it's all the employees, it's the customers. We're here to improve lives. We're doing every interaction to improve my life and your life. So, and that's important in the transition of ownership. And that's another reason why maybe the PE thing is not the direction we want to go right now, because it's a gamble. We've had some PE companies tell us that, hey, don't worry about that. We're very culturally focused, and we care about your people, and we care about you guys, and we want to make sure everybody wins. We want to win. We want you to win. But yeah, you have to kind of analyze that and say, okay, I guess the only way to know if you're telling the truth of that is to get through the process.
I guess just speaking to that, the cultural aspect, you said nobody's in the know of this.
They all know that I'm purchasing the
Well,
company from D.
well, right, because you said your title is
And they
right.
know that we're trying to finish the deal. What
Gotcha.
they don't know is the details of what's going on in the background, how we're getting that done.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And has there been any changes culturally? Is there anyone that's like, oh, I really don't like Tom. I'm getting out of here if he's going to be owner.
Not yet. Yeah. I mean, you never know, right?
I don't like how he manages me. So
Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to assume that some people are not going to be happy to see Dean go. That's reasonable to assume. So it would not surprise me.
I'm sure he's been there for a long time.
He's an icon of the business. He actually looks like the Linux guy. You know what I'm talking about?
Really? Yeah.
On the box with the mustache and the hat, the overalls.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to try to opt him in for can we use your image?
Yeah. Can we just use your image and not pay for it?
Company name is his name. So Dayco stands for Dean. I can't remember his middle name. Yarrington. Dean A. Yarrington Company.
Oh, really?
Dayco is.
That's funny.
Yeah, and we're keeping the name. We have no plans on it.
Yeah, I mean
an
it's
established brand.
yeah.
It's not gonna be any change in name.
I've actually heard this from other people too that have been talked to about ownership changes and approached, and the owner is steadfast in you cannot change the name. This has to be written in the agreement, and it's like no one's going to agree to. And he's been very frank about it. He's like, no one will agree to this. And I was like, well, okay, well that just means you're not ready to sell the company. If you're that beholden to this one thing, you're not ready to move on because you still feel like it's yours.
Example of what I was talking about. Sometimes they just love
Yeah.
the baby.
This person's not nearly as, I think they're our age actually. He's just not ready. If you're a genie and you can go back in time and, hey Tom, here's what you should do through this process. You're going back to Dean approached you and said, Tom, I want you to become an owner. I want to start shedding ownership and buying you. What would you go back to Tom in 2017 and say, or do differently? Say, Tom, absolutely don't do this and absolutely do this.
If I had,
as it pertains to this process.
if I had,
Your wand.
if
you had your wand and you were powerful,
smarter,
yeah.
I could have had a lot more cash put away to apply to this to make it a lot easier. I could have put double the cash. I am putting in some of my own cash into the deal, and it would have made it a lot easier for me if I just said, I could start sucking. So, not that I waste money, but I applied it to the house. Me and my wife are basically debt free, so except for a little bit on the mortgage of the house, and that's because we kept adding more to our payments. We were applying money in different areas. Obviously, this is not a dumb thing to do.
Yeah.
But I have less cash available now for a deal.
Because of those things,
Yeah.
right. And
So
but
that
that's
would
of course not knowing you were going to be doing that. The people that are good savers in general they're good savers and they can save that, and then when they're ready, they're like, all right, I've done my job and I've saved, and now here's my moment to.
So that's another one, like the license moment for me. That would be another one. It's like you never know when an opportunity. And if you have money, you're ready for opportunity. You're in on this deal. I have the money. I'm ready to go.
So what would you, flipping things a bit, what would you tell other owners that are perhaps, in a general manager position, and there's two scenarios here, but let's just go through both of them. Is one scenario is they've been approached, like Dean approached you, and what would you say to them?
I would say know your numbers and make sure your deal is clear between both parties. That's important. But I would say be very open, because if you're coming in as a general manager, zero equity, and maybe even zero assets to apply, and your owner is willing to come to you and say, I'm willing to work you. You have no money, I'm willing to work with you. I would say be open to accepting maybe a higher interest rate on money being lent to you than you're originally. That might shock you a little bit. Like, what do you mean 10%? Well, okay, it's prime plus 3%. That's not unusual. So be ready for
Right. Especially right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I would say be open-minded to accepting. If you're being allowed into the inner circle at the negotiating table and you've never been in that position, this was my case. I was very open to his ideas as to how he thought he could get this done to keep him comfortable. I built up 10% equity in 5 years in a company. That's a pretty good chunk of equity. I would say be open, but in the same token, make sure you know your number. I would get outside counsel. Okay? Take a look at this. What do you think? Not that you want that person to say, "Oh, he's doing this and blah blah blah," but make sure that you understand the deal that you're doing and maybe what the risks are. I was pretty naive about all that. Thank God that Dean is a very upfront, honest guy. So my trust proved fruitful, but that might not always be the case.
The other side of it is, what would you tell them? Make sure you're aware of this, or make sure you don't do that in terms of this journey or your experience.
Make sure you're aware of what is your payout and when is your payout. Right? Because there's not a defined end date or payout date plan, then when the day comes you want to talk about that, it might be uncomfortable. It's because you've never talked about that before. So it's so important things to get communicated between both parties, because I might be thinking 5 years and he might be thinking 10 years. And we never talked about it.
Right.
It's like, whoa, what do you mean 10
years? Yeah. Getting that up front.
What am I going to get out of this? And then, let's try to project a little bit. Whenever you're negotiating for large sums of money, we all have a tendency to say, I want this, right? Hello. How you doing? Didn't have a chance to introduce her, but we will in the next episode.
She'll be our next guest.
But anyways, and what I mean by that is, if I think I'm going to get $350,000 out of this deal, but if I wait 2 more years, I can get $500,000 out of this deal. That might mean me being greedy. Settling for $350,000, you ruin the deal by not settling for a really good payout because you wanted more. So you don't want to get that attitude. You want to. And this is something that a coach told me. You can cash out now at $350. If you get an offer right now at $350, but you had your eyes set on $500, would you do that? What are you willing to accept as an acceptable win, so that you're not always trying for more and more?
Right. Well, it's the ties to that adage of a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? So, do you wait and go for that, or?
Yeah, well,
there's risk.
There's in the bush.
Yeah.
There might not be 2 in the bush.
Right.
And they're not in your hand.
Yeah, exactly. And there's risk in leaving the one in your hand. You may not eat tonight. Thanks for being here on this beautifully sunny day.
Yeah, we got a tan while we're talking.
For you, as we talked about yesterday, it's probably the protection is good.
I just get a tan on the top.
I'm there too. I'm there too. Thanks everybody for listening. We appreciate it. Interested in Tom, you can reach him, daycosystems.com. All right, thanks.